I think partly it's like the individualism, right? It's like Trevor Noah said this thing on some interview about how maybe he said like the Western society or whatever structure it is that we have here, it's sort of that like the system removes community from our lives and then has us pay money to receive the community back, right? So, in the African context, as you know, like we have people babysitting each other's kids. Or if I need a ride, somebody I know would give me a ride, right? If I need food, somebody I know would cook with me, or I could eat at their place. But in this context that we're in the U.S. context, it seems like whenever I think of doing these things, I just like think about purchasing something, right? I'm thinking about Uber. I'm thinking about let me hire a nanny. I'm thinking about um
Pay for a service, basically.
let me pay, right, right. So I think that's partly what it is, right? It's like we have sort of, and I think this is something that is like worsening, but we have sort of removed the things that we used to depend on each other, which is like such a solid part of, I think, building community, right? And it's like, and we can see, like, I don't have the stats for loneliness and things like that, but in the American context, that is something that's getting worse for people. And I think just the idea of community is very much going away. So going back to like the borrowing money and the loans, and you could see, I've noticed that like even the culture of going out to eat with people, like people sort of like Zelle each other, Venmo each other, and pay separately, right? Like which is such a weird thing coming from the African context where like somebody pays for everyone, like whoever can afford that day would pay for a meal. So I think it's that like everyone is sort of just thinking about the me aspect of things. So it does feel wrong to ask for a loan from someone because it would feel wrong if somebody else asked me, right? Because it's very much like, and we have instead these other institutions to depend on instead of each other. I think that's more of like what I noticed.
Oh my God, let's get into that. One of the biggest culture shocks when we moved into America a couple years ago was discovering that people had to haggle about who pays for what. And the going Dutch, that blew my mind. Because coming from Nigeria, like you just said, in the Ethiopian context as well, when you go out to eat with your friends, nobody's thinking about who's paying. Nobody's thinking about going Dutch. Friends just pay for each other. You know, it doesn't become this drama that gets viral on social media. And then coming here and finding that it's a big issue, and then you have to Venmo and Zelle and things like that, it really blew my mind. And I'm like, wow, this is a different context.
Something I remember is this girl had a birthday party, but on the invitation card, she had written, like, make sure to bring your own money. And it's like, I get it. I get it, right? Like, it made sense to me. I haven't been in the US for so long. Like, it made sense to me because I'm like, because I wouldn't want to pay for everyone, right? But um, I was like telling my cousins that recently arrived from Ethiopia about it, and they were like mind blown. Like, they just like kept laughing about the whole thing. But it's to that extent, is like, people put like purse emojis on their invitation cards now. Like,
Wow.
don't forget your purse, don't forget your wallet. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I would say, like, there are times that people truly can't afford to feed you, right? Like, with
Mm.
my example, even on their birthdays, right? There are times, but I think we're just talking about like overall people tend to do that. But there's an example of there's this other Ethiopian restaurant in Austin, and the owner was like really struggling financially. So a bunch of people just got together and went in and ordered meals from him just to support his business. And then in addition to like eating there, they like sort of like collected a couple $1,000s among each other and gave it to the owner.
Wow. That's the power
Yeah,
of community.
exactly. They all have their caveats, I think. But for me, in my experience of living in the US, it's been like not too hard to switch, right? But once you're like kind of like deep in just like thinking about yourself and not needing people, you have to like pause.
What's a career and workplace norm in Ethiopia versus something in America that really blew your mind? And you're like, one country needs to switch.
I would say running a small business is, I mean, it's hard anywhere, but it's incredibly hard in the African context, right? Because it's um, the regulations, the bureaucracy, there is the uncertainty of things that go on. And I think the US has more of like a context that is more certain, right? And people could feel comfortable to invest, to start businesses, to do these things, to receive different types of support. So I would say like, when we talk about Africa, and usually gets negative when we talk about like the regulations and bureaucracy of things. So maybe taking that, I would say, like small business, and like I'm really a fan of small businesses and people like being entrepreneurs such as yourself, because it's people sort of doing what they want, right? It's like people's agency. So I just wish, or we can, um, I think as Africans, we can create a context that is more friendly for people to innovate and be creative and start things and be successful. So
I
I
totally
would say that.
agree because people on the continent are so innovative, so talented, so hardworking, and they're doing so much, but it feels like they just can't get things to work like it would in, more developed countries. So definitely I agree with you. That's a culture that needs to be swapped. How about a family practice? Think maybe communal living, retirement homes, calling parents by their first names.
Oh,
What would you swap regarding family practice between Ethiopia and the US?
when you said retirement homes, I just I had to, I had to pause. I'm not a fan of nurse. So in high school, I volunteered at a nursing home, and I think it like completely changed my mind in how I viewed like community and family.
Hmm.
Just the idea of um, like living a lot, building families, being with like having done so much in life, and at the end of just thinking about at the end of my life period, being by myself or being with people that I've never met before, right? Like it's kind of like a crazy situation. So I think there needs to be more of a culture that we need to borrow from the African context of people taking care of the elders and their families, right? And I understand some people might not be able to help them in their homes, but allowing people to sort of like share spaces with people they've known in their lives, right? I think like when it comes to the elderly and how we can care for them, it shouldn't just be about like the very basic needs, like are they fed and their healthcare, but also like their emotional well-being. Who are they interacting with? What are they doing? Things that they've been used to their whole life. So I would very much say how we take care of the elders and so many different things, but I think I would choose this one.
But tell us, for people who have no idea about the Ethiopian context, how are elderly people taken care of and how do they live? Are there nursing homes in Ethiopia?
There are some homes. There's like one famous charity called Macedonia that have been really popular, but that one is more for elders and people that are disabled who don't have families to take care of them, right? So these systems are good for people like that. But for most people, elders live with their children and their children's families. And even if they live in the homes that they've lived in, they're living very much near their neighbors that they've built relationships with, right? So they spend their days having coffee, chatting it up, like crocheting, knitting with their friends, like going to their local churches that they're very much used to, being part of, the community's associations, going to people's events, things like that. So they're very much like, um, and it's a very like common practice that like the elders have their doors typically like open for anyone to come in. So all types of people, children, their friends, their children's friends just like come in and visit and say hi and move on, right? So they have like interaction the entire day in a way. So I think that like that is how I want my time as an old person to be. So
Does that mean you'll be retiring in Ethiopia?
oh, I hope so. I hope so. I hope like I get to move back to the African context as early, much earlier than that, actually.
But I feel like most Africans want to retire at home because home is where the heart is, no place like home. And all the whole concepts of, being with family, being with people you're familiar with. There are cases I've seen in the news where people literally die and they're not discovered for weeks and months because nobody's calling, nobody's checking on them. And that's something that's really scary about moving abroad. But for people who are from a different context where people are always visiting you, and it's even an annoyance because like people are always in your personal space, and then you visit another place and you realize how much of a blessing that is.
We see that like there's so many ways that in the US context people are trying to sell community, right? Like it's all these like come do this class to meet these people. There's all types of apps to meet people, to be friends with, to date, to do all these things. So it's like, after all this of like stripping us of communities, we are learning that they're very much actually like essential to our well-being. So now we're trying to like build it back up again. But I think in the African context and in other contexts like that, like keeping what we have and understanding that like what we have is so precious. Because I think we get caught up a lot in our want to sort of like be more globalized. We get caught up in like wanting to take on Western values, right? And we sort of like lose how incredible our own values can be while other people are trying to get the same things that we already have. So I think it starts from conversations like these where we understand like the importance of these things and we like live by that.